It's time to get nerdy, y'all.
A little bit of gaming history for you.
Something relevant in gaming and discuss our opinions on it.
Should we kick it out of here, or should we kick-start it?
This is the part where you, the listeners, try to stump the hosts.
I'm not a lawyer. I just play one on a podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's Tuesday, June 18th, 2024, and you know what that means. Tomorrow is Juneteenth, but also, it's time to get nerdy, y'all. Welcome to episode number 308 of Two Nerds in a Pod, the nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. I am Lam, also known as Mr. Nice Guy, and I'm joined by my comrade in gaming commentary, the Miggity Mac, also known as Maction. Mac, how are you, sir?
You know, Mr. Nice Guy, last week we had a little bit of a chuckle about my surprise cat, as you will recall.
I remember.
I have been fit to be tied this week with not quite surprise animals, but additional animals as well.
Tell me more.
A friend had to, needed to go out of town. And this friend has a lot of animals, but it's like proper farm animals.
Okay.
Goats, horses, chickens, that sort of thing.
Sure.
Anyway, as a result of this needing to go out of town, that many animals poses some issues. And so, anyway, like an idiot, guess who is taking care of the animals while he's out of town? This guy.
But wait a minute. So you don't live on a farm, and these are farm animals. So
Yes.
Are you at this person's place taking care of the animals, or is your house just getting torn apart, pillows being eaten, books being shredded by goats? What does this look like?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question for clarification. No, I am taking care of them at their place. It's just a little bit of a surprise because, sometimes you may or may not have gone your whole life without keeping any chickens, and then suddenly you're keeping chickens for somebody else, and it's a interesting change. Now, I don't have to go too far out of my way to do it, but it is one of those things where it's just like, well, that's happening. So it's just probably the most interesting thing that's going on in my life right now, and also the most unexpected, I would say. But still, it's good. The horses are really nice. The goats are, little jerks, but they're fine. And the chickens, flap at me in a way that I think is meant to be imposing, but they're chickens, so it's fine.
Last question. Are these animals individually named? Or do they just respond to, hey, stop that, when they're doing things they're not supposed to do? This I've got to know.
The chickens, not individually, but the horses and the goats, yes, do have names. And whether or not they respond to the names has yet to be seen. They might just not respond to me when I say the names, you know what I mean? So for everything, it's just hey, stop it. I'm still learning the names, and they're still learning mine. I better wear my name tag next time, I think, is the lesson.
Nice. I like it.
But that's all that's interesting in my life. Lam, what is going on in yours, dude?
Dude, mine is not nearly as interesting as yours. There's no farm animals going on at all. But I will say lots of suburban dad stuff. That's become a theme the past few weeks. This past weekend, couple soccer games. And what I will say about them is both of my sons played phenomenal. My youngest son played some killer defense. It was awesome to see. My oldest son scored 2 goals of the team's 3 goals, including the go-ahead goal, and it was a beautiful thing to witness. So that was super fun. And then, we did a lot of, like I said, suburban dad stuff. We had a barbecue afterwards, not at my house, at the park for the team, and went to a graduation party and hung out and swam and did that kind of stuff in our neighborhood. So it was good. Mac, I will point out, I mentioned in the intro that it's Juneteenth tomorrow, also known as Freedom Day, celebrating the end of slavery in the United States. And it's a big deal. And I think that anyone who doesn't know about it or know the history behind it and how hard it was for it to even become a holiday, because there were people voting against it becoming a holiday, should really look into it. And in addition to teaching my kids about history on that day, one thing that I do is I like to often on Juneteenth get out for a round of golf. Now hear me out. This is not something that people like me could always do. Like, I'm being serious. And even in parts of the country in the South, there are still segregated golf courses.
Yeah.
And so often I will get out and I will play a round of golf, and I'll remind myself legitimately of the things that my predecessors, my ancestors, and yours had to go through for me to be able to do this. So shout out to everyone who celebrates Juneteenth. And Mac,
Yes.
on that note, I say we do what we do best, man, and hop right up in that gaming news, my friend. What do you think about that?
Absolutely, Mr. Nice Guy. What is new in video gaming?
So much. And this is episode 308 of Two Nerds in a Pod, nerdiest video game podcast in the galaxy. Mac, we're going to start off with something we haven't talked about in a while. A little thing called virtual reality. This is on IGN.com by Taylor Lyles. Taylor writes, "Don't expect the Vision Pro 2 anytime soon. Apple may be pivoting on its hardware strategy with the Vision Pro, as the tech giant is reportedly pausing work on a successor to the spatial computer to make a cheaper model. A new article from The Information reports that Apple is working on a cheaper model of the Vision, codenamed N109, with a target release date of late 2025. The report notes that Apple is looking to maintain the high-res displays in the cheaper model, but will remove some undisclosed high-end features, possibly features like eyesight," which is not literal eyesight, right? I think it's one of the trademark names of the features.
Okay.
Found in the Vision Pro. This should not only bring down the cost, but also make the device lighter in weight. Regarding pricing, The Information is reporting that a cheaper version will be more closer to the price of the Pro variant iPhone. This corroborates a report from Bloomberg's Mark Gurman penned last October, in which he said there were internal discussions at Apple about pricing a cheaper headset somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500. Mac, my questions for you are these. Number one, I don't remember the exact date of the Vision Pro release. I should look it up. But have we reached a point where we're now starting to get hardware revisions too soon? We had the Steam Deck come out, and then they released the Steam Deck OLED. Not that much longer, in my opinion. Apple Vision Pro came out. Now we're hearing about Vision Pro Lite, I guess is what I'll refer to it as.
Yeah.
Are we getting impatient? What's the deal with all these hardware updates?
So, the Vision Pro came out in February, like straight up beginning of February, like Groundhog Day, February of this year, to be clear.
Yeah.
So that is interesting. I don't know, Mr. Nice Guy. It seems like, and this is just my sort of unscientific take on it, I feel like the demand for the Vision Pro was 20 bloggers bought one, and then nobody else bought one.
Agreed.
It seems less like this revision is, angled toward, oh, we need one so much as Apple kind of collectively slapped their heads and went like, nobody will buy it. We must make a revision with lower costs so that we can actually sell units.
That's a good point. That may actually be the case. But once again, I'll use the Steam Deck as a reference, where we had the Steam Deck, and then I believe it was 2 years after it came out, maybe a year and a half, we got the Steam Deck OLED. Now, granted, we've had the Switch for 7 years. We've had the the PS5 and Xbox Series since 2020. So that cycle is still the same. But I just feel like, and maybe it's just me being an old man, that we're starting to get hardware revisions more frequently when they really aren't needed, sometimes not wanted.
For the Steam Deck, I think the differentiation was a bit more than a year. I want to say it was something like February 2022, and then OLED, I think, came out closer to maybe, was it like fall 2023? So maybe a year and a half?
Yeah, it was within 2 years. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I very much am kind of with you there. I was like, I don't know if that's necessarily exactly what we needed. And yes, Ishmael, maybe we are being a little bit of old man yells at cloud here. I mean, to put it in perspective, some of you know, I'm rocking a video card in this tower of mine that came out in 2016, and so long as I don't try and run too much crazy stuff on it, it's handling itself just fine. I don't know.
To shift a little bit, because, we've talked about that topic, but here's my real thought. I don't think about virtual reality at all anymore.
Okay.
And I have this big, beautiful Valve Index sitting right here. I know that some of our viewers have virtual reality, whether it's the Oculus, whether it's the Index, or something else. For a while, I was doing regular stand-up comedy at this, shout out to Phil Derinder Comedy Club, in virtual reality. And that's still there. I could still do it. But the idea of coming home, putting on a headset, and gaming, it just doesn't appeal as much anymore. Does anyone feel like that has changed over the past couple years? Has VR actually made any progress and I'm just out of the loop? Have you heard anything, Mac, that I'm not hearing in these streets, in these gaming streets?
In these mean gaming streets, I kind of felt like VR in a lot of ways had a heyday, particularly because of everything else that was going on. In the time when all of us were trying not to go out,
Yes.
not to stay home,
Yes.
VR made a real big resurgence in a good way. And because VR, to be clear, has been with us for years upon years upon years. We started things back with the Virtual Boy, even though, we've come a long way. But I think especially when we were so disconnected, the virtual world promised connections for us in a way that I think maybe we just don't have the same conditions, so we're not experiencing the same demand like we did.
I think that could be a big part of it. I for a long time, was a big proponent of Peloton, the company. They make these awesome bikes. During COVID, my wife and I bought one. We still use it, but not nearly as much now that we can get out and go for a walk or go to our local gym or, whatever. COVID, a lot of companies really benefited and then found that they just couldn't sustain the demand for their products post-COVID.
Mm-hmm.
You could still get COVID, but we're no longer in a lockdown.
Yeah.
So I think that you hit the nail on the head, and that's not really what I hadn't thought about that perspective until you said it. So that really may be the case. I hope VR doesn't die out.
Mm-hmm.
During COVID, I remember I read Ready Player One, and I was really into it, and I was like, oh, the Oasis, we've got to get to this point. There's so many cool things going on in VR, and people just don't realize it. Those things are still going on. I have Steam friends who I see logged into VR chat all the time. For me, I've just found other ways to socialize. And I was arguing for VR. I was a VR fanboy for a long time. I hope that VR can come back and prove me right. We got a couple other things to talk about today. On GameSpot.com, this is by Blair Marnell. There have been countless video games that have been canceled before their release, but very few that have been canceled 3 times. Kien, spelled K-I-E-N, a Game Boy Advance title that was originally slated to be released in 2002, is one of the few. Review copies of Kien went out to contemporary gaming magazines, including Nintendo Power, but the game was pulled before its release. 2 subsequent release attempts also fell through, but now 22 years later, Kien has finally gotten an official release from Incube 8 Games. The digital version of Kien, which is now available, and a Game Boy Advance cartridge release will follow later this year. Mac, this is a side-scrolling platformer with some RPG elements. My question for you is more about the price than do we like these things coming out or do we not? Because it's always great to see, in my opinion, pieces of history preserved and released. I don't think there's any debate there. Digital copy of this game, currently $9.99. I assume you're just kind of getting a ROM and you can play it on your PC or your Analog Pocket or your flash cartridge. Physical cartridge, not in like the Nintendo, but in like the Incube 8 Games, they're the one releasing this, is going to cost $59.99. What do you think about the pricing of this?
That is interesting. So, to be clear, the cartridge would be a Game Boy cartridge, right?
Yeah, it'd be a Game Boy Advance cartridge.
Okay.
Correct.
So I will say one of the things that I see week after week as we do this show and we're, and we look at Kickstarter projects all the time.
Sure.
There are a lot of people who put out new games for the Nintendo, for the Sega, for the Sega Genesis or for the Game Boy. And most of those times when there's a cartridge that's being done, it hovers at around the $50 mark for a new game being put onto a cartridge. Now, I'm not too familiar with the company who's doing this, but I will say that while I don't particularly care for the price point being quite that high for a physical cart, it seems to be somewhat in line with what other companies are able to produce when they're just kickstarting it. There is a part of me, though, that wonders if a company, rather than just a Kickstarter, which is ideally a grassroots, nobodies, aside from people with a dream and scrappy with a dollar, are able to put together. So, seems high, but it seems about what other people are able to manage.
Yeah, I guess my concern is I want to know, and I don't think that this is posted anywhere in the article or online as far as I can see, are the people who worked on this game being compensated? I mean, it's been 20 years. Some of them may not be with us anymore.
Yeah.
Some of them may have left the industry. But I would imagine that if I was an artist who worked on a game that was never released, and then that game was later released, I would not only want to be credited, but I would want to be paid. Now, granted, 20 years ago, pricing and compensation means may have been different. The terms in terms of you get residuals, you don't get residuals. You get, 10 cents for every copy sold or whatever it is. But I would hope that these people get some level of credit and some level of pay as this comes out. That's my one concern.
Does it say in the article who was the original developer of it?
It all it says here, it has a quote about the game, and it says Fabio Belsanti, lead game designer, Age of Games, formerly PM Studios. And it has a description of the game. So I don't know if he's the original lead or if he's the lead now of it coming out. But I just hope that these people who worked on this game get some type of recognition.
Yeah. Well, worst case scenario, maybe it'll have to be us doing it in a video game history thing in the future.
We'll have to wait and see. Hey, Mac, for the sake of time, that has been our news for the week.
All right. Well, now that we've looked around what's going on right now, let's look into the past with some video game history. And Mr. Nice Guy, I know the other week I was just like, nothing ever gets released in the summer. And, of course I was wrong. Because just the week after being like, sometimes we have some lean weeks, we've got a week like today filled with, shall we say, bangers.
I'm excited to hear.
But not limited to OG, way back in the day, a 1990 release for the arcade, a game called Missile Command.
Classic.
Yeah, absolutely a classic. Made use of that, of that trackball and everything, protecting your base from incoming missiles with your countermeasures. So that's cool, right? It's fantastic, deserves to be highlighted, blah, 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 blah. More importantly, Mr. Nice Guy, a release in 2000 for the PS1, Legend of Dragoon. Fantastic game.
This is one that you bring up a lot and that I have still yet to play. And I don't know that you bring it up a lot on the pod, but I know I've heard that you enjoyed this game. Tell me more.
It was a JRPG, played it back in the day, bought it with my own money, and then turns out near the end of Disc 1, there was a cutscene that had a scratch in it, and I could not get past Disc 1, because back in those days, you didn't get a chance to just buy a replacement disc. It was the whole thing or nothing, and that was out for me, sadly. But Mr. Nice Guy, I didn't want to focus on Legend of Dragoon because we had a more important game.
Okay.
Still cool, but not the most important game that came out this last week. That goes to a 2018, yes, not that far long ago, but a 2018 release, a game called Among Us.
Dude, what a game. What a game. I love it.
Okay, Mr. Nice Guy, I've never played it. Not even once. I haven't played it in any of its iterations.
What?
Neither in its Android release, which was this week in 2018, or its much later PC or Switch releases or whatever, or when it swept us all and everyone was playing Among Us. People talk about sus. People have all sorts of nonsense going on. It shows up in what's its name? The one Glass Onion. And everything like that. Mr. Nice Guy, help me understand. It is definitely the biggest game on the list, but what even is it?
Yeah, so Among Us first of all, it's a phenomenal game, and it's the ideal party game where you and a bunch of friends or a bunch of random people on the internet can set up a little room, and when I mean room, I mean like a hub, a server, and there's people who are determined to be the bad guys, the imposters, and there's people who are the shipmates. And the shipmate's goal is to repair the ship, and you go around different rooms of the ship, and you work to repair it. You do different things, you match numbers, you pull levers, you do all types of stuff. The imposter's job is to ruin that, to sabotage the ship, and to kill people, and to do so without being caught. And so that's the gist of it. And then every time someone finds a dead body, you go in and you vote, and you determine who the imposter is. You try to guess using logic, using persuasion, using, hey, I saw that person murder somebody, it's them, and trying to convince your teammates. And it's phenomenal. And Mac, there's a version of this game in VR that I own. It was like $10, and it's a lot of fun. It's one of those games that you can pick up and play quickly and have a good time.
Sounds a bit like some other video games like Trouble in Terrorist Town, one of those early Gary's Mod games.
Yeah, very similar vibe.
Awesome. Or like I've played some of these style games, these social deduction games in person, like Mafia or Werewolf. While some of these games, right, something that I'm more familiar with, like Neverwinter Nights or Legend of Dragoon, all those pale in comparison to objectively the big star this week, which is Among Us. But, Mr. Nice Guy, there is another thing that I also want to highlight that maybe you've heard about before or not.
What's that?
Have you heard about a little thing called the 4-Job Fiesta?
I have not heard about that. Tell me more.
Dude, this is a Final Fantasy V party game. Party game. It's sort of like it's like how the internet does with things. You know, you take a thing, you turn it into something else, and then you like run charity events and such. So every year there is a Final Fantasy V 4-Job Fiesta. And in the game, you have 4 characters, like many of these early JRPGs, right? And as the game progresses, you get additional jobs that the characters can be, whether that's knight, barbarian, white mage, so on and so forth. And in the 4-Job Fiesta, what happens is each year there can be certain requirements that everybody just kind of participates in. They make donations to, most years it's been Child's Play. I remember the first time I saw this was back in 2011, but because instead of it actually being a game that needs to be modified or anything like that, it merely just winds up being that you play the game with a specific set of rules, and a external program, used to be just like a RNG thing on Twitter, would determine which of the jobs from each crystal in Final Fantasy V you were locked into, would determine how you had to play and beat the game. So, like, you might get from one crystal, you might get like the knight job. From another, you might get the thief. From another, you might get Summoner, and from the third, you might get the Berserker. And then you would have to have one of those classes represented in one of your characters for the whole game playthrough. So it's kind of like, you've probably heard of Nuzlocke for Pokemon, right?
Dude, you're throwing out references that I'm embarrassed I don't know.
Dude, I don't want to go too deep into that because I've already gone too many rabbit trails. But just the point is that you don't modify the game. You just play the game, but with a specific set of constraints on you. Same as with Pokemon Nuzlocke. In that one, if one of your Pokemon, you have to catch the first ones you have options to. If one of them faints, it's donezo, and you kick it to the curb, even if it's your starter. But this is a fun way. Doing challenges like this is a fun way to breathe new life into an old game. And it's the type of thing that is very fun. And Spinnis the Menace, yes, Nuzlockes are no joke, but they are also objectively, this is the type of thing that you're seeing with Final Fantasy IV Job Fiesta. So if you're the type of person who might like Nuzlocke or making any kind of special requirements or stuff on a video game that you're playing, give 4 Job Fiesta for Final Fantasy V a shot. And get in on it. They do a big donation drive for charity and such. There are probably people right now on Twitch playing 4 Job Fiesta as we speak.
I like it. It sounds like fun, and I'm definitely gonna have to check.
Well, anyway, that's just what I had for video game history for this week.
Nice. Well, now it's time for our next segment, the topic of the week, a segment in the podcast where we talk about what's relevant in gaming and give our opinions on it. Well, Mac, as you may know, today was a big day in terms of Nintendo doing their Nintendo Direct. Now, for those who may not know, it's interesting. Someone in the chat who's a big Nintendo fan just said they have not seen it yet. Well, we're still going to talk about it, Spinnis, and it's good to have you here. You may or may not know we just had the Summer Games Fest earlier this month, and Nintendo was not present because they wanted to do their own thing. So that's one of the disadvantages, Matt, of having it be digital, having it be virtual, is some of these companies say, hey, if we're not going to be able to get in front of all the eyes in person, we're just going to do our own thing, and that's what Nintendo did. Now, Mac, have you gotten to take a look at what was announced in the Nintendo Direct?
Yes, you cheeky little man. You sent me the link. So
I don't know if you looked at it. That's all I'm saying.
I did take a look, in fact, and I saw a lot there that I am excited by.
Awesome. So let's read this article, and then I want to hear what you're excited by. So this is on IGN.com. Who's the author? Logan Plain. He writes, I was told there was supposed to be a software drought while we waited for the Switch 2. I was told to expect a handful of ports, remakes, and remasters sprinkled throughout the rest of 2024. I was told the Switch was dying. Well, apparently no one told Nintendo, and if they did, Nintendo certainly wasn't listening, as today's Nintendo Direct was one of my favorites in years, with surprise announcements that will make the wait for Nintendo's next console incredibly easy. Don't unplug the dock from your entertainment center just yet, because the Switch still has plenty of juice left. If you were completely removed from video game news cycle and you watched the June 2024 News Direct, you'd probably think it was a presentation dropped somewhere in the peak of the console's life cycle. Well, Mac, here's some of the things that were announced. First off, and I'm just summarizing here, Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, which is a top-down Zelda game, Mac, in Link's Awakening style, Link's Awakening HD remake style, that allows you to play as Zelda for the first time, where Link has been captured.
Au contraire.
What?
Au contraire.
Oh,
Wand of
tell me
Gamelon, my dude.
What's Wand of Gamelon? Is that a proper Zelda?
Yeah, Faces of Evil and Wand of Gamelon, 2 Philips CDI games released in 1993 and 1994. And in that second one, in Wand of Gamelon in 94, you could play as Zelda.
I thought you were actually going to say Super Smash Brothers or something.
No, are you kidding? I'm not ridiculous like that. I'm just ridiculous enough to bring up Wand of Gamelon.
To reference the CDI. No, fair enough. No, that's awesome. So, okay, so second time, or third if you want to count Smash Brothers, that you can play as Legend of Zelda, or as Zelda.
Yeah.
We're getting Dragon Quest, we're getting Ace Attorney, we're getting Mario and Luigi Brothership, we're getting a Donkey Kong Country HD remake. Apparently there's other stuff. There's so much. What were you most excited for? My head's about to explode.
Echoes of Wisdom. I'm very much looking forward to that. Not being silly at all. Although I was excited to see that there was going to be a Donkey Kong Country game because I know you love that one.
I do. And it's a remake. It's funny.
Okay.
I wasn't even planning this, but I have the booklet here for my Wii version of the game. And I love Donkey Kong Country. Donkey Kong Country 2, one of my favorite games of all time. This is an HD remake, but I'm still excited for it. Because one of the other things Nintendo did today is they announced that there are going to be several more games released for the Switch Online. One of which is Metroid Zero Mission, harder game to find. Recently, they released all of the Mega Man Game Boy games for Switch, including Mega Man 5, which is expensive and hard to find. What do you think about controlled accessibility, controlled game preservation? Because we always talk about needing ROMs or needing the hard copies of games, but do we feel like as long as Nintendo has a copy of it and we know it's in existence, that makes up for the fact that it's hard to find? What do you think?
Not really. I don't think so. Particularly because we still aren't even scratching the surface on the number of titles that are still inaccessible. I think it was pointed out by, I forgot which person it was, but Nintendo, for whatever reason, is still selling a copy of the original Mario Brothers on their emulation situation that they downloaded from the internet because we can read the files, and it's still either the second, maybe it's the third Mario ROM that was ever dumped, because it's still got those headers on it. So
Sure.
I don't have that much trust in Nintendo having our backs with regard to preservation. Maybe they're turning over new leaves, but I don't think we can necessarily trust them. But I am excited by the prospect that people will have access to more and more, and I think it's great, especially with these games. Like, is Little Samson available on the?
Absolutely not. Nope,
No.
it's not on the. It's not on there.
Gotcha. A fantastic game that's nearly impossible to get your hands on as a result of its collector status and how few of them were released. But
Yeah, it's
something
expensive.
everybody should experience, I think. It's very late NES, but amazing usage of the hardware and clever tricks. So yeah, I mean, I don't want to be pithy and be like, well, call me when they do Little Samson. Even at the height of the eShop that's no longer existing in the 3DS or the Wii, we don't even have very much of a fraction of those titles that were available then. So I think we're maybe one step forward, two steps back is kind of my general
I think
feeling.
we're talking about two different things because
Okay.
I'm more saying the fact that the game is preserved and exists.
Okay.
And I mean, I guess there's a chance that Nintendo could burn down. But even then, I think that they probably have copies of these games in the cloud. So my point is more, there's not really a risk of these being lost to history. Yes, they're very hard to access, and it can be frustrating that we can only access it on their terms, i.e. those terms being you buy a subscription to our service and we allow you to play it without earning it. But at the same time, there's a certain amount of peace of mind of us knowing that those games are not going to be lost, that they are out there. I guess the analogy that I would use is there's a Wu-Tang album that is like a one of one, and it's like a gold-plated, very, very special edition, and some multi-millionaire guy owned it and would not let anyone else access it. To me, that's the type of gatekeeping that frustrates me, because there's some music there, there's some history there, there's some art there that I will never get to experience, and that if he chooses to throw it into a fire will never be experienced. With this, Nintendo is saying, hey, we know some of these games are super expensive right now, i.e. Mega Man 5 for the Game Boy. We're going to make it available so that you can experience it, but you do have to give us $20 a year or whatever that costs right now. And I think that that's more admirable than holding on to an album and not letting anyone listen to it. That's all I'm saying.
I think that, yes, it's better, but it's not as good as it could be, and maybe not even as good as it should be.
I think we're in agreement there.
Yeah, I think so.
And I will also agree with you that Zelda is the thing that has me most excited. And I wish that we had done an episode right before this happened. Because one of the things that I would have predicted would have been a top-down Legend of Zelda game. Because it's been a while since we've had an original one, and they are absolutely my favorite types of Zeldas. Now, the other thing we got that's probably the biggest announcement is Metroid Prime 4. And we've had this conversation before, Mac, but 7 years ago it was announced. Yesterday we finally got not a release date, but a release window, which is 2025 is when Metroid Prime 4 is coming. After it was announced in 2017 at the beginning of the Switch life cycle. What do you think about this series of events in terms of making people wait for so long? I don't know if you got to watch the trailer. It's really nothing new. All we got is that it's coming out sometime next year. I have strong opinions on this type of behavior.
Well, it gives me time to play through Prime 1, 2, and 3. Which I'm grateful for because it was just, I think it was only a few months ago that I managed to secure a copy of those 3 of the Metroid Prime trilogy for the Wii. So,
nice.
Gives me time to look forward, get that squared away. But yeah, it is a long time to wait.
I guess I just don't agree. There's really not a lot of people who make games that do this. We know that there's probably going to be a Last of Us Part 3. We know that it may even already be in production. We know that there's going to be a Fallout 5. We know that there's going to be an Elder Scrolls 6. And I guess technically Elder Scrolls 6 has been announced. But in my mind, there's no reason to announce those things 7 years in advance, especially when to make a Metroid game, the cycle for making the game is not 7 years. They could probably make it much, much faster than that. But instead, they just have everyone hoping and waiting. It's like Hollow Knight Silksong. We're like, when are we going to get it? Give us some information. Don't just tease us with this.
Half-Life 3 confirmed, my dude.
I wish. I want Left 4 Dead 3 more than Half-Life 3. But I think I'm in the minority there. I don't know.
Same.
Bottom line, Mac, I think game companies should stop doing this. Shadow drop stuff, fine. Announce it a year before. But, there's still a chance it's going to be delayed. So I'm not that excited yet. I will be excited when it comes out. That's my thoughts on that. And shout out to Flaming Phoenix. Yes, please, we need Silksong. I agree. Mac, anything else you want to say on this topic?
I will just say that at least Galvatron says that he seems to think that it was a result of switching from Bandai Namco to Retro Studios to develop the game and redoing it from scratch for the long delay.
Okay, that could be true. I would imagine they probably still had access to many of the assets though. And so unless the game just completely changed direction, I still think that that's a long time. That's just Mac. Anything else you want to add?
Well, there was another thing from the Nintendo Direct that I thought was exciting, and that was they mentioned, and I think it's available right now, is the what is it? The World Championships.
It's in July. I think it comes out.
July. You're right. It's next month. But it is kind of funny because a lot of back in the day, right, around the time that the NES Classic came out and I got eternally salty at Nintendo, that was back when I was involved with Retro Gaming Live TV in a big way, we did this big thing to sort of celebrate the collection coming out, where we had these sort of mini goals on each of the games that was going to be on the NES Classic. So far as to me, I did a couple of different games and the categories, like Ice Climbers or so on. And it wound up being a real fun time. And so I couldn't help but smile when I noticed that as I was watching the thing, that they had all these sort of like mini goals on all these various early released NES games for that World Championships. And I was just like, oh my gosh, the speedrunners are going to love this.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was it.
Yeah, I'm excited for that too. And I'm excited for all the stuff Nintendo has announced. It's going to be a good ending to the Switch, which makes me even more excited for the Switch 2. I can't believe that they're going to start that off without a lot of good software. So it's interesting to see what they're holding back.
Yeah.
Mac, that's been our topic of the week.
All right. Well, now let's take a quick look at a crowdfunding project that's trying to get off of the ground. I'm putting a link in the chat, and you can have a look with us. This is a game called Glide the Dragon, and it should almost immediately evoke Spyro vibes, because that's exactly what they're going for. Now, between when I flagged this to talk about on the show and now, it has passed its minimum funding goal of 63,500 or so. Now, this is a project out of the UK, so the conversion from British pounds to US dollars, 25 British pounds is what they're looking for as the minimum buy-in for this game, which is about $32 US dollars. And the estimated release date of this isn't until December 2028.
Oh, wow.
Which is a long ways away for sure. So what we can tell you about this game is that, again, Dragon protagonist, very much Spyro vibes, 3D environments, cartoony cell shading in style, and it has an art style that reminds me a lot more of sort of a mix between Spyro and Okami, actually. One of the things that they make a point of doing is incorporating a lot of elemental work in this game. And they show doing things like combining, whirlwinds, but turning them to flame tornadoes, stuff like that. As you progress and add more of these elemental powers under your belt, being able to use them in interesting ways to solve problems. Now, there is another one that leaves me a little bit scratching my head, but there is a reference to I believe they say to something more like a Dark Souls or a Souls-like approach, which is very interesting. And at the very least, makes me a little bit concerned, being as such a terrible gamer as I am. But they're looking at a bunch of things for various stretch goals, if you like what you're seeing. The co-op, which they have a local version that is currently buggy but working right now. Trying to stretch goal for console release and other things. Anyway, don't want to get too into it as we're already a bit behind, but Mr. Nice Guy, any thoughts?
Yeah, I don't like this. I like the idea of the game. Ishmobile hit the nail on the head. He said they have, and I don't want to steal your thunder, but he says they have a demo and they still need 4.5 years to develop it. There's so much wrong with this. Nothing with the game, but more with how they're running the Kickstarter. Number one, I don't even see an intro video here. If you're going to ask for people to give you money for something that's 5 years away, at least make a video, show your face, and plead your case. And that's something that we see with almost every initial Kickstarter that's not a sequel of some sort, is the developers showing some gameplay and saying, hey, here's who we are, here's why this game is special, here's why it's our passion project, please support it. And I'm not seeing that anywhere here on the page. Am I wrong? Am I missing something?
No, there are definitely some, some sort of GIFs that show little snippets throughout. But yeah, no, you're 100% right.
So that's frustrating. The date, as you mentioned, is far out. I think that's fine, but, I hate to be a broken record, but I always say when you're doing this type of thing, you need to pay yourself first. And so if your goal is $63,000 to fund this game and it's going to be 4 years out, you're not paying yourself and you're not paying your team. Now, if it's just a side hustle, that's fine. But I wonder if it's just a side hustle, if you could have found a way over 4 years to fund it yourself rather than asking others to put money and faith into you to fund something that you weren't even brave enough to show your face about. I know I'm being harsh here, but I want to keep it real for our audience. These are things that are big red flags to me.
I will give them credit for one thing that they do that I'm always harping on people to do, and that is to right at the top highlight that there is a demo for your game, because you need a demo to show us that things can work. And yeah, it does have a demo, but it is surprising, as you pointed out, as Ishmael said in the chat, they have a demo and still need 4.5 years to develop it. You would hope that that the demo would have enough of the bones of the game that you could do it in less than 4.5 years. But yeah, maybe the team's a little bit too small, in which case, you need some more. Or maybe the amount of money is not going to allow you to, like Lom said, pay yourself, in which case you need to set these things higher. Now, they've still got 21 days to go, and they've met 70,000 now. It's possible that they will be getting the sorts of money that it would take to produce this, maybe even more quickly. I don't know, but
Yeah.
if you want to give it a look, give it a go. Playable demo is an option. It is going to be a kick from me, because while I do love the idea, I like the look. Yeah, that is a long way out, and I think if your sight is set that far out, you've either exceeded the scope has exceeded your grasp, I feel like. And I don't think that's bound to get better. If anything, I think that's bound to get worse as time goes on.
Here's what I'll say. At least they're being realistic. It would have been very easy for them to put out a demo and say, hey, this is 1.5 years out. But I have to acknowledge that there's a certain amount of integrity from people who say, this is 4 years out. Right? That's honesty. They really believe that. They're not saying we can get it done in 6 months or 9 months. They're saying, no, this is going to take some time. But at the same time, that level of honesty is also a lack of self-awareness in thinking that people should give you their money for something that is that far out. And so it's a kick for me.
Well, as with anything, we wish everybody the best. However, I think we're going to pass on this one. But Glide the Dragon does look great, and Val 4 Games, we hope that we hope that you produce the game that you were planning on this whole time. But that's been Kick or Kickstart.
Love it, love it, love it. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now it's time for Nerd Flex. A segment where you, the viewers, try to stump the host. Sometimes you do, and sometimes you don't. If you're here live, you have a job to do. Let us know in the chat. Oh, and we already got a bunch of questions in the chat. Wow. What a great feeling. Let us know in the chat your multiple choice gaming-related question. Mac and I will do our best to use nothing but our noggins to answer. Mac, I will read the first one. Comes in from Flaming Phoenix. Which of the following games featuring Mario came out first? Ooh, this is a good question. Mario's Time Machine, Mario Picross, Mario Party, or Mario Teaches to Type? This is a very, very good question.
It is.
Now, I want to offer one correction.
Okay.
I think it's actually Mario Teaches Typing, but that's just a technicality, because I believe that I had access to Mario Teaches Typing in the 90s. When I was playing it on my PC. Mac, what are your thoughts on this before I dive in? Because these are all older Mario games.
Of the list, right? I know of all of them. I have only ever played Mario Party. And I feel like, and I know Mario Party came out for the Nintendo 64.
Correct. I believe we can eliminate that.
We can. I think you're right. Now, I believe Mario's Time Machine is either NES or SNES.
Pretty sure it's NES. 99% sure it's NES.
Gotcha. Mario's Picross also feels like an SNES game to me.
No, Mario's Picross is an 80s game.
Oh, okay.
And or a Game Boy game, I should say. Maybe 80s, early 90s. The reason I know that is because when I went to Midwest Gaming Classic, my friend Tiankum, who came with me, friend and listener of the show, was looking for that game. And it's definitely an original Game Boy.
Okay, gotcha. So an original Game Boy, it would be on your shelf. So original Game Boy puts it in a certain period of time. And then Mario Teaches Typing, that feels like a 90s game to me.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, back when we had this sort of thing. So I feel like I'm leaning more toward A or D is where I'm leaning. How about you?
It's tough because I don't think Mario Picross was one of the first Game Boy games. I feel like it was probably middle of the life cycle. So, like, I think these are all 90s games. It's just a matter of which one we want to go with. I almost want to eliminate Mario Teaches Typing
Mm-hmm.
simply because I feel like initially they weren't really allowing Mario to be used for non-Nintendo stuff.
But the early days, we're talking Wild West, man.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. But I remember playing Mario Teaches Typing on my PC, and I'm trying to think what year that was. I was old enough to be typing. Yeah, so like 94, 95 is what I'm thinking for Mario Teaches Typing. So I'm pretty sure Mario's Time Machine was before Mario Teaches Typing.
Okay.
I lean towards Picross or Mario's Time Machine, and I'm thinking it's Mario's Time Machine.
Okay. Well, I'll go with you on A, final answer.
Oh my gosh!
The answer is D. Mario Teaches Typing was the first, released in '92 for DOS. Yeah, a slightly wrong name, he admits. And yes, they were all 90s games. So all of them were in the 90s, not the 80s. But D.
You got us, dude. Flaming Phoenix. That was a really good question.
That was very good. Thank you. All right, we'll hop on over to the next multiple choice question, which is from Spennis the Menace. The Pokemon franchise has evolved over 9 generations of games, and Gen 3 impacted the game in numerous ways, including natures and what mechanics? Was it eggs, natures, the physical special split on attacks for every type of move, or the fairy type?
Ooh.
Spennis, our resident Pokemaster.
I know eggs are a big thing, but what are we talking about? What Jenny's talking about? Gen 3?
Yes.
Oh, so this
Gen
is pretty
3.
early. Okay. I think eggs are more recent.
I want to say that eggs were something that we found in Gen 2, in Gold and Silver.
Oh, really?
I want to say that you could hold eggs, you could hold bows, you could hold things like that. So I think eggs isn't the way. And I want to say that the fairy type came out in Gen 2 as well.
This is all you, man. You know more about this.
So I'm inclined to say either the physical special split on attacks for every type of move or the natures. And I'm leaning more towards the physical special split. But honestly, I am kind of grasping at straws here.
Yeah, this is all you, because you know Pokemon way better.
In that case, we will go with the physical special split as our final answer.
All right, Spennis, let us know.
Oh, abilities was what I meant to write down and wrote it wrong. Natures was already in the question. The physical special split was Gen 4, and the fairy type is Gen 6. Okay, so we got it wrong, but we also had the options.
Technicality.
So technicality, we call that one a wash. Mr. Nice Guy?
Question from Galvatron. He always comes with the complicated Mortal Kombat stuff. Who is the third playable ninja introduced to the Mortal Kombat cast after Scorpion and Sub-Zero? So they're 1 and 2. Okay. Smoke, Cyrax, Sector, Noob Saibot, Ermac, Rain, or Reptile? Mac, this is tough.
So I'm pretty sure that the answer he's going for is Reptile, but I think this is a trick question because I believe at the same time Reptile was introduced, we also had other, like Noob Saibot and such, I believe, were introduced as sort of like hidden characters in the same game. So I think...
And are all of these ninjas? Or is he trying to trick us there as well?
No. I believe all of these are considered to be the ninja crew. I mean, Cyrax and Sector are like robots, but they're also robot ninjas. So,
right.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the answer he's going for is Reptile.
Let's go, Reptile. Final answer, and let's see what we've got. Mac, the answer was Reptile,
Woohoo!
and he says that we cheated. How could we have cheated? I know he's joking. But hey, we went we'll call it 1 for 2 today.
Okay.
Because of a technicality, and that has been Nerdflex. Thanks for the question, Joe.
All right. Well, now we turn to a little bit of legalese.
Legalese.
Just a quick little thing for you, but some of you may have seen that over this weekend, people started talking about a class action suit in the UK against Valve. So this is a suit for $656 million pounds rather, which comes closer to 850 million US dollars. And the crux of this argument is that Valve has been, and I'll quote it, unfairly shutting out competition for PC games, meaning that UK customers have paid too much for those products. And they cite 3 ways in which they claim that this is going on. And they say, number 1, that Valve requires price parity of its sellers and keeps developers from offering better prices on other platforms. Put a little star on that one.
I think that's not true.
I'm inclined to agree with you for reasons we shall discuss. Number 2, Valve requires add-on content to be purchased from Steam. Also seems kind of strange because you kind of have to buy the add-on content in the same place that you buy it. I mean, which we could go there, but it's different. And then third, Valve's 30% cut is an excessive commission that they contend. And so they say for these reasons that people in the UK were paying more money than they should have been for their PC games. Now, I'm not a UK lawyer, and I'm not an American lawyer, but I don't think this is going anywhere for a variety of reasons, but one of which is things that, Lum, we've talked about before in the context of the Apple v. Epic thing, where we found out that not only is everybody charging 30%, but also some people, like Sony's, getting an additional cut on top of a 30% cut. Which we found out, as Epic was just like, 30%'s crazy. And then everybody else had to testify, be like, yeah, we're charging 30.
That's what we're doing.
30.
Yep.
We're charging 30. So it is. Now, we can have the conversation about, is it an excessive commission? I mean, but is it what the entire landscape is doing? So it's hard to point out one person and say, you're the bad actor for doing 30%. When everybody's doing 30%. And that's kind of what these folk are trying to do. Additionally, number 1, Valve requiring price parity, I don't think there is. I'm skeptical like you. I think there's no evidence to suggest that Valve requires price parity in its stuff. So it seems like this is a bit overblown, and it seems like they don't really have the documented evidence to back it up, including but not limited to when I went to their site to take a look at what the claims were and everything. There was this thing that's just like, look at our claims and look at our documentation, and the documentation section was under construction. So there was no documentation to look at, and we'll see.
I feel like Saul Goodman might be their lawyer.
I don't know. I think Saul Goodman would have at least doctored some documentation.
Right?
Yeah. So anyway, that's not the law. It's just some legalese.
That's so interesting. I have so much to say about that, but we really don't have time. I will say there's a webpage called isthereanydeal.com if you're a baller on a budget, which leads me to believe that there is not price parity because you can buy Steam games, Steam keys from perfectly legal and legitimate web pages and then activate them on Steam if you're looking for a deal on any game. So maybe I'm misunderstanding their argument, but I feel like that proves it wrong right there. Thank you for tuning in to episode 308, everybody. Before we go, we have one last segment called What We've Been Watching and What We've Been Playing, where we talk about just that. The cool, nerdy stuff we've been into across all platforms. And if you're here live, you have a job to do. Let us know in the chat what you've been watching and playing, because we're always looking for new stuff. Mac, what have you been watching and playing?
So I've been watching a little bit of the new season of The Boys, also the new season of Bridgerton, and then just some general YouTube cooking shows here and there to relax and unwind. As for games, I've mostly just been playing Baldur's Gate 3, still almost at the end, but it has led to many, many hours of enjoyment. So still on that Baldur's Gate 3 train. How about you?
Dude, we're getting good suggestions in the chat. I have been, dude, it's funny because I haven't had much time to watch or play. Those of you who follow the show know that I have an Analog Pocket, which is the retro Game Boy that allows me to play old school games, and I have been doing a lot of that. Lots of Mario Land, lots of Alfred Chicken, a little bit of Tetris. I feel like I'm getting old, Mac. I just like playing the old stuff. But I have been doing a ton of Balatro on Steam. I've gotten so many hours. I'm trying to unlock all the achievements, unlock all the decks, and that may be my game of the year until the new Zelda comes out. So I'm excited for that. What else have I been playing, man? Just a few Steam games here and there. As far as watching, I have been watching a little bit of the NBA Finals and still watching quite a bit of Billions on Amazon Prime. I don't know if I shared that before. Mac, why don't you take us home?
All right. Thanks, everybody, for coming out to the show, for coming out to episode 308. We appreciate you being here, and hopefully you had as much fun as we did. If you are new, thank you for being here. If you are well-seasoned, we appreciate you just as much. And for those of you who are listening after the fact, thanks. You can catch the live recording of this show on twitch.tv/2nerdsinapod most every Tuesday, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Central. And be excellent to each other, everybody. And until we see you next, keep it nerdy. Bye.
See ya.